Supernatural Season 15, Episode 16, Drag Me Away From You. So this, I have to assume, is the final flashback episode that we get for having Sam and Dean as their kid versions. I love the episode. I thought this was a really good episode, actually, and one of my favorite things about it that I noticed kind of as the episode continued on was that this was clearly a throwback episode. Like, there weren't a lot of jokes. They didn't do a lot of their themes. It was very serious. Like, the whole episode, I was like, this reminds me of like it felt more like season 1 type stuff where all they did was like it's a spooky show about two brothers that solve supernatural mysteries, and it felt like one of those really old school episodes. Like there were tons of moments in here where they could have played up a lot of different jokes. Like they literally have Dean go past a couple, they're actually having sex, and he just goes like it was nothing. I'm like, Dean now would have like made a million jokes about that, or he would have been laughing or something. But they played this episode really serious, outside of the fact that they, like, the one scene, which I figured, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's Smoke. They have, like, one other person we haven't seen in this episode again, and I'm like, it's probably going to be somebody smoking, which is very, very funny, because at the time, I did a reaction for this episode, which will be uploaded tomorrow. It was actually a 421. I took my edible before that, so I was actually high watching this episode, but it was very funny, appropriate, mixing of the 420 elements there. But I love the episode for sure, because they clearly played it very serious. Like I said, they didn't use a lot of their themes. They didn't play up a lot of different jokes. It was like everything was fairly serious. And a big thing that I noticed as far as what made me recognize like, oh, they aren't doing a lot of different musical cues, is that it's completely silent. And that's a lot of the original series. Like there were a lot of moments where it would just transition. It was like, okay, they're talking. There is no music. Like, it was either spooky music or no music. And that would be, like, the entire episode. And that's just something I never really... it's something that you kind of just forget about. And then when you see it, it's like, oh, man. They didn't have, like, the little things where it's like, oh, well, that, the theme when they're, like, in the middle of an episode, and it's like, okay, we kind of got one up, but that kind of sucks. And they play, like, some little thing in the background. It was like, nope, it's all spookiness or 100% just character dialogue and nothing else. Because there were literally moments where I was watching and I was like, is the volume even on, or is my thing muted or something? I was already having that issue where like every time it came back from commercial, I don't know what the deal is with the CW side. They did that for like the last 3 episodes. Every time it would come back from commercial, I would have to like mute it and then unmute it just automatically just to get the audio. So I was like, did I do it right? Is it muted? And then someone would say something. I was like, wow, it was so insanely quiet that I literally couldn't tell, because I'm like, they're standing there. Like, there were a couple of shots where I was like, I don't think that was because I was high, but it was genuinely just like, they would be standing, and I felt like, I feel like I should hear them moving or something, and it was literally dead silent until someone spoke, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. And I think that was just them, they would kick in, and it was just like, it's just dead silent. Like, they didn't start the cues in the very beginning. It was literally just, whatever they're doing is important. So it's either serious and there's no music, or it's spooky because they're running into this ghost. And I like the element of the ghost in this episode as well, where they were actually affected by it. That was another thing that kind of threw it back, because it was, kind of like Dean's first case, and they always thought it was a success. So, they end up having, the young boy, he ends up dying, or well, obviously he wasn't a boy at the time, but he ends up going, back to the hotel or the motel or whatever it was. He ends up getting killed, so they end up going back, and his sister was like, his funeral was like last week. I just had to tell you to make sure that you would actually come, because I think she's alive. It's like, there's no way, like, everything stopped. So they assumed that it worked, and then we find out, of course, by the end of the episode, that what happened was Dean sliced off her fingers, so that dropped the ring, and it hit the ground, and that was like the source of her power. So once that happened, it was like, oh, okay, well, she was detached from her own abilities, and then that was it, and that kind of just ended things. And then the guy, he went back because he was haunted by it his whole life. He was like, I'm not conversion therapy. I forgot exactly what she said, but I knew the term, which is funny, I can't think of it now, but immersion therapy. Oh, there it is. So of course he goes back, and unfortunately that does end up getting him killed, and that gives this ghost her power back. And I like how they did it. I love the fact that it was a lot of hallucinations. Like, if we have, obviously, 15 years, it's very rare that we see a ghost that really deals in hallucinations like that. Because mostly it's just, the only people that see hallucinations are the people that look in the mirror, and then it's like, oh, okay, you're the person that dies at the beginning of the episode, and that's the curse. It's either a Bloody Mary type of thing, or something else where the ghost only exists in reflections, or, something like that. So I was like, okay, we've had that. And those, that tends to be the max on hallucinations. Like, people will think they see ghosts and they of course assume they don't, but they did. Or they will see crazy hallucinations literally just before they die, and then someone will have to come in and save them. If Sam gets affected, then Dean saves them at the last minute. Vice versa, which we actually see in this episode. It was kind of a classic moment. Like, Dean was actually about to lose, and then Sam came in. Not that that doesn't happen like all the time at this point, where they're fighting every version of every supernatural being ever. But because the whole episode felt classic, it was like, yeah, that's a classic moment. They split up, somebody got busted, and they were just about to get killed. And then the other, one of the two came in, and it was like, all right, save the day, everything's cool. So I love the way the episode was handled. I like the hallucinations. Like they show the kid when he gets grabbed. That was like the one scare that actually got me, because the whole time, speaking of reflections, I just assumed she was going to show up in the reflection of the vending machine, and she was going to be behind him, and it was going to be like the classic mini spook where he's like, whoa, and he turns around, and that was like his first interaction with the ghost, where she freaks him out, but then she takes off. But she just grabbed his hand, and I was like, oh, that's not really what they do most of the time. They're typically just like, oh, first big spook, and then that's it. And it was like, no, she grabbed his effing hand and was like pulling him in. And I was like, oh, okay. And then all of that was a hallucination. And then, she's taken the form of everyone, they see themselves when they're younger, except the sister. She actually ended up seeing her dead brother, and before he ends up, kidnapping her. And I love the way it was handled. And then at the very end, Dean is literally like transported inside this hallucination, and he sees, a young version of Sam. So love the way they handled that. I like the fact that the whole episode, it was just little hints here and there. It was like, oh, what a surprise. The beginning of the episode, they show it. It's like, as soon as the episode started, I was just like, I wonder if he told Sam. I wonder if Cass actually told him, which I figured he did. But I was like, I wonder if Cass actually told him what happened. And then, of course, they show the text message. It was like, did you tell Sam yet? And I was like, of course he's keeping secrets. That's super, super classic Dean. And this was a really good episode for his character, because it was one of those things where it was like, character development over 15 years. I would hope there is some. So they show, you have young Dean. We have those hints of old school Dean, where it's like, that's like almost his classic thing. And even Sam mentions it. Like at the end of the episode, it was really good. It was like, I thought we were past this, because I think the last time, it was the same thing. It was some big secret. And it was like, this, we're in the end game. Like, you can't be keeping these little secrets, because I can't handle it and this and that. But I love the way it was handled. And, throughout the episode, it was like, the truth is always better and stuff like that. And Dean kind of telling them the secret at, I think it was like in the middle of the episode, where he was like, I actually did find those kids. And she mentions like, that's what you were hiding from me that time I forgot where the heck they were. It was like a cannery or something. And she was like, that's what you were hiding. He was like, yeah. And the reason I didn't do it is because it was the first time that had ever happened to him. So I love that one. He was like, man, I had nightmares about that for weeks. And I was like, that's really cool. That was that first experience. And it's one of those things you don't really think about, like, what was that first failure, for Dean? And this was actually it. It was technically like his first big failure, and they didn't realize that. They thought it was a success, and he already had that crazy scary moment, and then he built up a bit of an immunity over time and became a bit more callous. But that was that first time, and he flipped out, because it was like he saw a pile of dead kids, and it was like, okay. And he protected her and was like, okay, like, it's nothing, it's just the key, let's get out of here. And then, of course, same thing at the end of the episode with Sam. He was just like, no, they're gone. And that was it. And he never even told them, like, yeah, I saw the bodies, because he didn't want them to even think about that they were just there in a pile. So I like that element. It was, Dean still being tough Dean at the time, but it was really cool. And I like the way they handled his character. At first, I thought he was a little too mean when it was young Dean, and he was, kind of messing with Sam about college and stuff like that. I was like, that seemed oddly harsh. Like, it just seemed like harsher than he normally is, because that's always like his thing, is that he's only really, it's like he only knows like 3 people. It's his brother, his dad, and Bobby. So he only knows like 3 people anyway. But that was always like the thing, was that he was always nice to his little brother. But that was like the one time where I was like, man, he just seemed a little mean there. It was a little odd, but they kind of, the way it kind of went throughout the episode, and it was like, okay, it kind of fit, and that was always, it even technically still made sense, because that was kind of a part of his dad seeping through, like, hey, this is what we do. They had him say, it's the family business. I was like, that's cool. They had him do it like one of the early moments when he ever said it to somebody. So I like that as well. But great episode. It was clearly a throwback, unless that was just me being super high and just being like, I'm finding all these things. But it felt like that was clearly what it was meant to be. Like I said, the scene of Dean going past like the people having sex, and it was just like, and he just nods and then keeps going. I was like, that's old school Dean. That's like classic, it's still kind of the beginning. As long as he'd done it, it was still kind of like, all right, I'm still kind of callous and cold, and like I do my mission and then I keep on keeping on. And that's not what we have with Recent Dean. Like they've gone through so much crap. It's like, whatever, end of the world, we got it. Better them than us, which was an actual thing. So that's it was really interesting. I like the way they handled it, and him, telling Sam by the end, and of course Sam is mad because it was like, man, what the f? Like how many times? Like there has to be a supercut by the end of this series. How many plot lines where Dean found? It was like, here's the plot line, big thing. Dean knows. Here's Sam. Nah. And then 4 episodes go by, and then there's a super big argument. It's like, you should have just told him. That's all you had to do. Like, that was the big thing. And Sam's done it from time to time, of course. But that's like Dean's whole... That's like literally... That's got to be like 4.3% of his whole character is hiding some giant piece of news and just being like, sweet, we're just moving forward. No big deal. No problem. That's Dean Winchester. But I like the way they did it. Of course, we're hitting the end game. 4 more episodes. Sadly, Billy apparently won't be in them until like maybe the last one or the last 2, because she's just like, I wasn't in this chapter of the book. And it's like, oh, that's convenient. That's real convenient. So it was cool to see Billy pop up. It's like, here's how things are going down. This. All the planets are gone. He'll be back fairly soon. Get your ducks in a row. End game. This is it. So I'm excited. 4 more episodes. We're meeting Adam, the first man, in the next episode. So that should be interesting. I'm very curious how they're gonna do that. So I'm looking forward to that episode. I feel like that one's definitely gonna be funny just based on the trailer. But I absolutely love this episode. I love the last one. Check out my review and reaction for that if you guys are interested. Like I said, I will have my reaction for this episode up tomorrow night. So check that out if you guys are interested in that as well. Would love to know your thoughts on this episode. The flashbacks, the way the episode was played out. Did you kind of get that old school feeling, or am I just crazy? Because I'm telling you, like, there are so many things in this where I'm like, it's just quiet. There's like no music. There's no tunes. It's, it was a very enclosed, sort of thing. Like they were in the motel. They went to eat, and I swear I think that in the cannery area, and I really think that was it. Like the whole episode, and technically, you count the car. So outside of the car, they literally only were in like 3 different spots, and they were barely in the the little cannery factory. But I was like, man, that's another thing with older episodes. It was it almost had that sort of claustrophobic sort of feeling. And this one, they made it even easier because it was literally like, we know exactly where to go. So that's, the only thing they needed to do was stay there. So I like the way they handled it. Yeah, it was just a really good throwback episode. I definitely loved it. I don't know if I like this one more or the one before. Like both episodes were definitely well done. Like I really loved them. So it was like 2 really great episodes to watch back to back. But I would absolutely love to know what you guys thought about it. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it. With this most likely being the final, sort of flashback episode where a lot of the focus is on them as children. I would love to know your thoughts on the final 2 actors we got to see as young Sam and young Dean. What do you guys think? Like, this is kind of it. I feel like, once again, they did sort of a throwback episode with the way it was just done thematically, and like, the music and how serious it was. So I would love to know your thoughts on that. Did it feel awkward or out of place to you because it's been so long? Or did it kind of feel cool? Because like that was, I think it took me a minute, and it was, I don't remember what scene it was, but something just clicked, and I was like, that's why this feels different. Not outside of me just being high. That's why it feels different. It's just a different episode. There aren't a lot of jokes. There's minute jokes, but there's not a lot of jokes, and there's not a lot of music. And the way that they treated this singular spirit actually affected them because it was a failure. So it also had like a lot to do with how it played into the actual story that made it even more serious for them. So I really like that element. I really like what they did with this whole episode. It might go down, honestly, it might go down as one of my favorites just because of how it was such a throwback episode. It might end up being one of my favorites because it was like, man, that really took me back to like watching the older episodes. Like it instantly was just like, dang, that girl on the bridge. Like it was that type of episode where it just flashbacks. Like it just took me back to older stuff. So personally loved it. Would love to know what you guys thought about it. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.